put your phone or device aside and immerse yourself in this audio story. Perfect for listening on the move, while relaxing, or for bedtime listening. We release new stories daily, so make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out. This story is based on true events. The 3:47 a.m. protocol. They say money never sleeps, but in 2025, while the world slumbered, something else was wide awake, something patient, something methodical, and by the time the sun rose on what seemed like another ordinary day in the digital age, $2 billion had simply vanished. This is not a story about stolen art or robbed banks. This is the story of the greatest wave of coordinated theft in human history. A crime spree so sophisticated, so vast, that it makes every bank heist, every jewel theft, every con in history look like child's play. And the criminals? They never set foot inside a single vault. They never held a gun. They never even left their keyboards. Welcome to 2025, the year cryptocurrency platforms discovered they were building sandcastles against a rising digital tide. The year when cold wallets, those supposedly impenetrable digital fortresses, turned out to be unlocked vaults. The year when the blockchain revolution learned a dark lesson. In the shadows of innovation, predators evolve faster than their prey. February 21st, 2025. Dubai, 3:47 a.m. local time. Inside Bybit's operations center, automated systems executed what should have been a routine transfer, moving funds from their cold wallet to a warm wallet for daily operations. Cold wallets, you see, are supposed to be the cryptocurrency industry's version of an underground vault, completely offline, completely secure, completely impenetrable. The digital equivalent of storing gold in a mountain fortress guarded by armed soldiers. But at exactly 3:47 a.m., something extraordinary happened. The transaction went through. The multi-signature verification passed all checks. Multiple senior employees had authenticated the transfer. Every security protocol showed green. Everything looked perfect. Except for one microscopic detail. The destination wasn't Bybit's warm wallet at all. By the time anyone noticed, 400,000 Ethereum, $1.5 billion, was already flowing through a digital labyrinth spanning 50 different wallets, each holding exactly 10,000 ETH, spreading like mercury across a table, impossible to recapture, impossible to freeze. The largest single theft in human history had just occurred. Not the largest crypto theft, the largest theft, period. Larger than Saddam Hussein's $1 billion raid on Iraq's central bank on the eve of war. Larger than every art heist, every gold robbery, every bank vault cleaned out in the history of crime combined. And this was just the beginning. But here's where this story takes a turn into something far darker than a simple tale of technological failure. Within hours of the Bybit heist, blockchain intelligence firms were tracing the stolen funds. The laundering patterns were distinctive, specific techniques, particular routes through the digital underworld that had been seen before. The signature was unmistakable. North Korea's Lazarus group. The FBI's attribution came swift and certain. This wasn't some teenager in a basement or opportunistic hacker collective. This was a nation-state operation, a military unit operating under the direct control of the Hermit Kingdom's regime, stealing not for personal enrichment, but to fund something far more chilling. According to United Nations intelligence, every dollar stolen by these hackers flows directly into one destination: North Korea's nuclear weapons program, ballistic missiles, weapons of mass destruction, the means to hold the world hostage. In other words, every crypto exchange that got hacked in 2025 didn't just lose money, They accidentally funded one of the world's most dangerous weapons programs. And Bybit was just the opening act. By the time summer arrived, the pattern had become undeniable. This wasn't a series of random attacks. This was a coordinated offensive, a systematic campaign targeting every vulnerability in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. May 2024. DMM Bitcoin in Japan lost $320 million. The exchange tried to recover, raising emergency funds, but the damage was fatal. By December, they announced they were shuttering operations, transferring what remained to another platform. The hack didn't just steal money, it killed the company itself. June 18, 2025. Iran's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Nobitex, woke up to discover $90 million had vanished overnight. But this heist carried a different signature. The stolen funds were sent to vanity addresses, blockchain wallets with custom messages embedded in their addresses. And what did these messages say? Fuck terrorists. This wasn't financially motivated crime. This was digital warfare. A hacker group called Predatory Sparrow, with alleged ties to Israeli intelligence, claimed responsibility. They stated explicitly, this was retaliation against the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, punishment for funding terrorism, and nuclear weapons development. Cryptocurrency exchanges had become battlefields in an invisible war between nations. July brought a relentless barrage. India's Coin DCX, 44 million stolen through compromised employee credentials. Big One in Seychelles, 27 million drained through a supply chain attack on their deployment pipeline. WOOX-14 million through sophisticated phishing. Each attack more refined than the last. Each breach revealing new vulnerabilities that the industry never knew existed. By mid-year, the numbers told a story of systemic catastrophe. Over $2.17 billion stolen in just 6 months, a 133% increase from the previous year, already surpassing the total losses of 2024, with half the year still remaining. 75 separate incidents. Average hack size, $30 million, double the previous year's average. The cryptocurrency industry was hemorrhaging. But the truly terrifying revelation emerged when security researchers began analyzing not what was stolen, but how. The attacks of 2025 marked a fundamental shift in cybercrime methodology, a shift that made every previous security measure obsolete overnight. For years, the crypto industry had focused on technical defenses, better encryption, more sophisticated smart contracts, multi-signature wallets, cold storage, air-gapped systems. The assumption was that if you built the technology strong enough, you'd be safe. 2025 proved that assumption catastrophically wrong. Because North Korean hackers, and increasingly other sophisticated threat actors, had figured out something profound. Why break the lock when you can convince someone to open the door? Social engineering became the weapon of choice. Not brute force attacks on code, but psychological manipulation of humans. They'd spend months cultivating relationships with employees at target companies, fake LinkedIn profiles of recruiters offering dream jobs, romantic relationships initiated through dating apps, professional networking connections that seemed perfectly legitimate. In the Coin DCX breach, investigators traced the attack back to a single software engineer in Bengaluru, a trusted employee with system access who had been compromised through methods still not fully understood. Did he know he was being used? Was he a willing participant? Or had his credentials been stolen through manipulation so subtle he never realized he'd been targeted until federal agents appeared at his door? The WOOX attack showed the evolution of these tactics. A team member's device was compromised, not through a technical exploit, but through a phishing attack so sophisticated, so perfectly tailored to that specific individual, that it bypassed every security awareness training, every warning sign, every red flag. Even Bybit's fortress-like cold wallet fell not to superior technology, but to what investigators believe was malware that altered the signing interface. Employees saw one thing on their screens: the correct destination wallet, the proper authentication process, while the underlying smart contract executed completely different instructions. Reality itself had been falsified. Trust had become the exploit. And this realization sent shockwaves through every industry that handles sensitive data or valuable assets. Because if cryptocurrency platforms, built by some of the most security-conscious technologists on Earth, could be systematically compromised through human manipulation, what chance did traditional banks have? What about healthcare systems, government agencies, military contractors? The weakest link in any security system, it turned out, had always been standing right in front of the monitor. But even as this dark realization spread, something stranger was emerging from the data. Not all the stolen funds were being laundered immediately. Blockchain analysts noticed that certain wallets, particularly those associated with attacks on individual high-net-worth targets, simply sat still after the theft. Hundreds of millions in cryptocurrency, just waiting. Criminals were holding onto stolen assets like long-term investors, betting that the cryptocurrency they'd stolen would appreciate in value. Thieves had become unwitting participants in the very market they were exploiting. Which raised an uncomfortable question. Were these attacks purely about immediate funding needs, or had something more sophisticated evolved? Had nation-state hackers become, in essence, criminal hedge funds? The implications were staggering. If hostile nations were building strategic cryptocurrency reserves through theft, they weren't just funding current operations, they were building war chests for future conflicts. Digital nest eggs that could be activated when needed, laundered through increasingly sophisticated channels, converted to weapons or influence or power at the moment of greatest strategic advantage. North Korea alone had accumulated an estimated $6 billion in stolen cryptocurrency since 2017. $6 billion in untraceable, portable, globally liquid assets. Enough to fund entire weapons programs for decades. Enough to survive any sanctions regime. Enough to ensure the regime's survival, regardless of what the international community attempted. Cryptocurrency, designed to be freedom money, permissionless, censorship-resistant, liberating, had become the perfect tool for the world's most repressive regimes to evade accountability. The industry responded with a desperate escalation of defenses. Insurance providers tightened coverage terms and raised premiums by up to 30% for crypto custodians. Exchanges implemented ever more complex multi-factor authentication systems. Security budgets ballooned. A 2025 survey showed 63% of exchanges had raised cybersecurity spending. Yet 31% still reported at least one successful breach. Because here's the dark truth that emerged from 2025's carnage. You cannot build walls high enough to keep out someone willing to become your friend, your colleague, your confidant, before they rob you blind. The attacks weren't slowing down. They were accelerating. If the current pace continued, analysts projected that stolen funds could reach $4 billion by year's end. $4 billion. Vanished into the digital ether, converted to missiles and malware and the machinery of state-sponsored aggression. The cryptocurrency revolution had promised financial freedom, decentralization, escape from the control of governments and banks. Instead, 2025 revealed it had created the most efficient money laundering and theft mechanism in human history. A system so perfectly designed for criminal exploitation that even its creators seemed powerless to stop the bleeding. Some exchanges tried to fight back. Bybit offered a 10% bounty on recovered funds, a potential $140 million reward for anyone who could help track down the stolen Ethereum. By summer, $42.89 million had been frozen through the combined efforts of blockchain intelligence firms, law enforcement, and the exchange's own investigators. But that represented less than 3% of what was stolen. 97% had already disappeared into a laundering pipeline so sophisticated, so distributed across jurisdictions and platforms, that recovery seemed impossible. The thieves had learned something that traditional criminals never fully grasped. In the digital age, distance is irrelevant. A hacker in Pyongyang could drain an exchange in Dubai, while routing through servers in 17 different countries, converting through decentralized exchanges that required no identification, mixing funds through protocols designed specifically to obscure transaction histories, and emerging with clean cryptocurrency that could be sold anywhere, anytime, to anyone. The blockchain, that supposedly transparent, immutable ledger that would make all financial crime impossible, had become the criminal's greatest ally, because while every transaction was recorded forever, the sheer volume and complexity of the data made it practically impossible to trace in real time. It was as if every thief in history had been given the ability to rob Fort Knox while leaving a perfect record of having done so. But that record was written in a language so complex, spread across so many volumes, updated so constantly, that by the time anyone deciphered what happened, the gold was already gone. And still, incredibly, money kept flowing into cryptocurrency platforms. New users signed up daily. Trading volumes remained robust. Bitcoin crossed $105,000. The market seemed almost indifferent to the systematic looting occurring behind the scenes. Perhaps because most users never experienced a hack directly. Perhaps because the industry had become adept at containing reputational damage, reimbursing affected users, maintaining the appearance of security even as the foundations crumbled. Perhaps because, in the end, the promise of wealth, the dream of catching the next Bitcoin surge, the next revolutionary token, the next 1,000 times return, was simply too seductive to resist, even in the face of obvious, catastrophic, systemic risk. Greed, it seems, is a more powerful force than fear. As the year wore on, a grim pattern became clear. The attacks weren't random. They were strategic, coordinated, escalating. Each breach revealed new techniques that would be deployed in the next wave. Each successful theft funded the development of more sophisticated tools for the next attack. The criminals were learning faster than the defenders. They had budget, motivation, state backing, and the infinite patience of military operations conducted in the shadows. They could afford to spend months researching a single target, weeks cultivating a single employee, years developing a single exploit. The exchanges, meanwhile, were fighting on multiple fronts: regulatory compliance, user acquisition, market competition, technological innovation, and somewhere down that priority list, security. Because security doesn't generate revenue. Security is pure cost, pure overhead, pure friction. Until the day it isn't. Until the day the hackers come. And then, suddenly, catastrophically, it's the only thing that matters. But by then, of course, it's far too late. The truly chilling aspect of 2025's crypto heist epidemic wasn't the technical sophistication of the attacks. It wasn't the staggering dollar amounts. It wasn't even the revelation that cryptocurrency had become the preferred funding mechanism for hostile nation-states. It was the realization that this was just the beginning. Every successful attack trained the next generation of hackers. Every laundered fortune proved the system worked. Every failed defensive measure taught the criminals what to target next. The cryptocurrency industry had built a machine that minted not just digital coins, but also digital weapons, a perpetual vulnerability engine that rewarded the most ruthless, the most patient, the most willing to exploit the gap between technological possibility and human nature. And that gap, it turned out, was unbridgeable. Because you can patch software, but you can't patch people. You can encrypt data, but you can't encrypt trust. You can build the most sophisticated security infrastructure in human history, and it all crumbles the moment someone clicks a link in an email from a person they believe to be a friend. 2025 taught the world a lesson about the future of crime. The greatest thefts won't happen in the street, or in bank vaults, or through violence. They'll happen in silence, in code, through relationships carefully cultivated and ruthlessly exploited. They'll happen the way Bybit happened, with every security protocol showing green, every alarm silent, every system functioning exactly as designed, while $1.5 billion simply walked out the digital door. And somewhere, in a nondescript building in Pyongyang, or a server farm in some jurisdiction beyond the reach of law, or a laptop in a bedroom halfway across the world, someone is already planning the next heist. Already researching the next target, already cultivating the next victim, already writing the code that will make 2025 look like practice. Because if there's one thing 2025 proved beyond doubt, it's this. In the digital age, the biggest robbery in history isn't the last one that happened. It's the one that's happening right now, while we're still counting the losses from yesterday. The invisible heist never ends. It just moves faster than we can see it. Subscribe and listen to our next story below.